A warm welcome to the History Show here on Uxbridge FM, and it's fabulous to welcome back our Lord of History, Ken Pearce. Morning, Ken.
Good morning.
Now, let's have our first story today.
Right, well, I want to talk about Uxbridge in the 1930s today. The local authority at the time was the Uxbridge Urban District Council. It covered Harefield, Ickenham, Hillingdon, Uxbridge and Cowley, and was sometimes called North West Middlesex. Middlesex, the county, was still then the administrative council and was responsible for health, libraries, education and main roads. For example, Hillingdon Hospital at that time was called Hillingdon County Hospital. The Urban District Council looked after waste disposal, smaller roads, parks, open spaces. In fact, there was a strong belief at the time that Uxbridge ought to have a higher status, that it should become a borough and have a mayor as leader. So the council began to prepare a case for the upgrade. Alas, war intervened, and borough status was eventually gained in 1955. The town had 3 railway stations, which was most unusual for a town of that size. The one in Vine Street was a branch of the Great Western Railway from West Drayton. Another, at the west end of the High Street, was also a GWR branch, this time coming south from their main line at Denham. It was intended, by the way, at one time that those 2 lines should be joined, but that scheme was abandoned just before the First World War. The 3rd station was the terminus of the Metropolitan Railway and was where Sainsbury's is today. You can see what the building looked like because they used the same plans for the station at Ruislip. So you look at Ruislip Station today, you can see what Uxbridge Station used to look like. But in 1933, Piccadilly line trains came through to Uxbridge as well, and it soon became apparent that the station with only 2 platforms was inadequate. So London Transport began to look around for a new site for a larger terminus. Across the High Street from the Market House was a long row of condemned cottages called Bell Yard. Incidentally, that's said to be one of the reasons why the shopping centre is called the Chimes. Bell Yard. Anyway, London Transport purchased the whole site for the new terminus. Considerable excavation was needed to get the diverted line under York Road. And in the course of this work, the tooth of a mammoth was found. Unfortunately, expert opinion at the time said it was in poor condition and should be left in the ground. So we haven't got the evidence to look at today. At the time, Uxbridge Council was trying to widen the High Street, so the new station was set back, leaving a large open space in the town centre. The station opened in December 1938. In 1930, electric trams were still running between Uxbridge and Shepherd's Bush, with a terminus here outside what is now the Nonna Rosa restaurant. Trams, of course, were on rails. They had overhead wires, and they were very noisy. But in 1935, they were replaced by trolleybuses on Route 607. These vehicles needed overhead wires, but they could pull into the curb, were much quieter, and had a strong acceleration. London Transport also ran local bus services. Those in the London area were painted red, whereas the country buses were green. The bus garage was on the Oxford Road at Denham. There was still horse-drawn traffic, but the number of cars in the 30s was steadily increasing, and at times the High Street was quite congested. Belmont Road and Vine Street were widened. In fact, the whole of the old main road from London to Uxbridge was becoming blocked in rush hours. But work had begun on a major bypass known as the Western Avenue. Today we know it as the A40-M40. It had reached Uxbridge by the outbreak of war. In many parts of the country, the period between the two wars was one of depression, unemployment, and strikes, including the general strike. But our area seems to have largely escaped. The industrial complex at Hayes included the Gramophone Company, later EMI, Kraft Cheese, and Nestle's Chocolate Factory. It was always called Nestle's, by the way. E acute doesn't exist in our area. In Uxbridge, there was the Bell Punch Company and the Steel Barrel, and the Low-and-Shawyer Cut Flower Nursery. The latter employed over 1,000 people on a 200-acre site. In addition, film studios opened at Pinewood and Denham. So, in that difficult period between the wars, people were actually moving into our area. North Hillingdon grew from nothing. In 1920, Long Lane was a narrow country lane. In 1939, it was a major road. Unfortunately, there are no census returns from the 1930s, so we cannot be sure where all these people came from. Some certainly arrived from South Wales. The 30s were the great age of the cinema. The two that were opened in Uxbridge in 1930 were joined by two others by the end of the decade, the Regal and the Odeon. The opening of the swimming pool in 1935 was a giant step forward for leisure activities. On the outskirts of the town was the RAF station, which was known nationwide as the home of the famous RAF Central Band. But what we did not know until after the end of the 1939-45 war was that the construction of an underground operations room had begun as part of the air defence of Great Britain. Today, that Battle of Britain bunker is of outstanding national, if not international, importance.
Thanks, Ken. That's great. Interesting that we had 3 stations in Uxbridge at one point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and a tram and trolleybus terminus as well. Everything seemed to stop here, and it was said that Uxbridge had a sort of end-of-the-line look. You could get to Uxbridge and then you couldn't go on anywhere else.
There did seem to be a bit of a penchant for cinemas as well back in the day.
Yes. And there were additional cinemas in the area roundabout as well. You know, Ruislip, Hayes, Useley. Plenty of opportunities to go to the pictures.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks, Ken. More in a moment.